Last week we made these adorable pumpkins out of old sweaters. Well, this week we are here with another fun fall craft because today I am making a fall banner and I think it is so cute. I am really excited to share this with you guys. This is another beginner-friendly sewing project. We will be using a sewing machine, but if you don't have a sewing machine, you could totally hand stitch. It would just take you a little bit longer. It's so beginner-friendly, so if you're scared of the word sewing, you can do this. I believe in you. We are going to be doing some embroidery as well, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun, so let's jump right into it and make the cutest fall banner. Also, I just have to say that the day that I filmed this, it was pouring rain, which was so perfect for making a fall craft. It really set the mood. Okay, we're going to start off by talking about supplies. You can take a screenshot, pause this, save this for later when you actually go to make it. But I'm going to talk about supplies I used. You can kind of make this your own after you watch the tutorial and substitute certain things, and we'll talk about that later on. But here's kind of the general idea of what you're going to need. You're going to need fabric scissors, pinking shears, embroidery floss, and a needle, a sewing machine or a needle if you're doing it by hand, and thread. Fabric, you're going to cut out 2 triangles of each kind of fabric, also felt in 2 different colors. You'll also need some twine for stringing your bunting banner, and you can use ribbon or other things. We'll talk about that later on if you'd prefer over the twine. You're also going to need pins or clips and then cardstock for creating your pattern. Also, if you don't like using fabric scissors on paper, you might want to grab a pair of normal scissors for this first part because we're going to start by making our pattern. Creating the pattern for your bunting pieces is very simple. I used cardstock and my sheet was 12 by 12 inches, and then I just folded that into 1/3 and then drew a line from the height that I wanted that triangle to be all the way to the edge of my fold, and then I cut that line straight across. Once I unfolded it, I realized that it was a little bit wider than I wanted, and so I just kind of adjusted my cut slightly until I was happy with the way it looked. But folding it is the best way to get a symmetrical triangle. I was going for an equilateral triangle, meaning the same length on all sides, and I wasn't worried about it being perfect, but that's kind of the look that I wanted. And so I just kind of played around with it until I achieved that. Now, when it comes to cutting out your fabric, you're going to use obviously the pattern that you just created. And for my bunting banner, I made 6 different triangles, but each triangle has a felt piece and a fabric piece. I just use like quilting fabric. I think it's like cotton or something. And so every single triangle has the fabric piece and the felt piece that go together, and that's what we're going to be sewing together. That means that because I did 6 total triangles, I had to cut 6 felt pieces and 6 fabric pieces. Now, some of the felt is going to be facing forward on the ones that I embroider, and then on the ones that I don't embroider, I'll make sure that the fabric part is facing forward. So I basically chose 2 different fabrics to face forward. I chose a light pink terracotta color and a dark brown color. Both had floral designs in it. And then I chose 2 different colors of felt, a white and a brown felt. I am going to have 2 white felts showing and 2 brown felts showing or facing forward, and those are going to be embroidered. All the rest of the pieces are going to be the fabric side facing forward, so either the pink or the brown will be showing. I have 2 pink, 2 brown, 2 white felt, and 2 brown felt that will be showing. So you can obviously adjust that however you want, but the important thing to know is that for every triangle you want to create, you need a felt piece and you need a fabric piece. And then you can decide if you want the fabric showing or if you want the felt showing. So once again, in order to create it the way I did it, I needed to cut out 12 total triangles. Once you've cut all of your fabric, you're just going to sew the 2 pieces together with the right side showing. So wrong sides together, right side showing. You're going to sew all around the edges. I just left like probably less than 1/4 inch. I basically lined the edge of my foot of my petal with the edge of the fabric and sewed a straight line all the way around. I'll show you in slower motion later on. Then I grabbed my pinking shears. So those are those jagged scissors that can cut fabric, and I just went around the outside of the triangle to kind of finish it and make it look really cute. And that's all you really need to do in order to attach your triangles. But you're going to want to wait to do this step on your triangles that you want to embroider until later on, because you're going to want to embroider before you attach the back to the felt. But I went ahead and did this for the ones that I'm just going to be showing the fabric and I'm not embroidering. Again, using those pinking shears just to finish off that edge and make it look intentional the way that I sewed it. And this honestly was so super simple and super easy. That's really all you need the sewing machine for, is just to sew the two pieces together. So if you're intimidated by using a sewing machine, like I said, this is totally manageable, and I'm going to show you later on in slow motion in case you're still feeling intimidated by the sewing machine. But we're going to next do the embroidery on this banner. Now, if you feel like you're just not ready to try embroidery, you can skip this step and just do all different types of fabric. Like, you don't have to do any felt facing forward. You could just do the fabric facing forward with the felt backing, and then you don't have to embroider anything. But I liked having the felt showing with the embroidery on it. I just think it's a fun touch, and it kind of makes it feel like an heirloom piece. And so I basically drew a little acorn with pencil onto my triangle. Now, if you don't feel confident enough to draw directly onto the felt is what I'm doing the embroidery on, then there are a few ways around this. You could get water-soluble stabilizer or dissolvable fabric that you can print directly onto. So you could find a design you like, print it onto the water-soluble stabilizer or dissolvable fabric, and then you put that right onto the fabric, embroider over it, and then use water to dissolve it. Or you could use a Cricut machine like I did in my fall Cricut craft video and draw your design using the Cricut machine directly onto the fabric. So those are some ways around drawing directly if you're not confident with your skills. Now, I didn't need an embroidery hoop for this because the felt was stiff enough that it was pretty easy to embroider. Now, for my embroidery, I'm only really using 3 colors. I have a dark brown, an orange, and a goldish color. And for the top of the acorn, I am using a French knot, which basically means that I pull my needle through the fabric and then I wrap it 3 times like you see me doing here. I wrap the string around the needle 3 times and then I just poke it back through the fabric in a spot next to where I pulled it through originally. And then I just pull it nice and tight. And that creates a little knot, and this is a really fun texture for the top of the acorn, and I think it looks really cute. I just filled in that entire area with the dark brown color. Next, for the bottom part of my acorn, the nut part, I am using that gold thread. It's kind of like a goldish yellow, and I start at the top of the acorn and then work my way to the bottom. I just do one single stitch from the top to the bottom over and over and over again. Now, obviously, because the acorn is oval shaped, as I get closer to the middle, those stitches get longer, and that's what kind of creates the illusion of that oval shape. So when I'm in the center of my acorn is where my stitches are the longest, and then as I get closer to the outsides, my stitches get quite a bit shorter. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure that we have at least one embroidery expert in the comments below. So I think this is called a satin stitch, but if I am not correct, let us know in the comments below. Tell us what it's really called. I'm pretty new to embroidery, to be honest, but I think it's so fun because you can just learn a few simple stitches and all of a sudden it opens up a world of possibilities and you can create so many different designs. I feel like embroidery is such a fun way to add details and really make a piece feel like an heirloom piece or give it a special statement, and those details really go a long way. Also, embroidery floss is pretty inexpensive. It's actually very, very affordable, and you can get so many colors for such a good price. So if you're looking at this and thinking this looks way too intimidating, embroidery is not an expensive hobby to pick up and try, so you might as well see if you like it. I just think it's so fun and so rewarding. Okay, for the stem and the veins of the leaf, I am using a back stitch, which is a very simple, very easy stitch. Basically, I come up a stitch length away from my last stitch and then go down in the previous stitch hole. If you're kind of confused about any of these stitches that I'm naming, you can watch in-depth tutorials on YouTube. There's so many good ones. I realize next time I do some sort of embroidery or anything detailed like this, I want to try to get better, closer shots for you guys and be able to explain it better. But I'm constantly learning through making these videos. So in the meantime, if you want to know how to do a French knot, a satin stitch, or a back stitch. Look up those videos, learn how to do it, because those are the only stitches I use throughout this entire thing, and they're very basic, very easy. For the actual leaf, I again used the satin stitch to just fill in the shape of the leaf, and I avoided going over the top of the veins of the leaf because it would just cover them up and you wouldn't see them. But yeah, just use that simple satin stitch and filled in my leaf completely. If you're still feeling overwhelmed about the idea of starting embroidery, I would recommend just picking up like a little embroidery kit. They're not very expensive, and they come with like a design printed right onto the fabric and all the thread that you need and a little hoop, and you can get them for like a couple of dollars. And that's a really good way to start learning some different techniques. They usually have instructions on them, and so if you're like, okay, I need to practice first, then that's a great way to go. If you're like me and you're like, I'm just going to jump in and make the project I want to make, and I'm going to figure it out as I go, I really think you could manage to figure out these leaves and this little acorn. It's pretty simple, and again, like, it's a learning process, so if you don't get it right the first time, that's totally fine. You can start new. These triangles are not hard to cut out, and just keep going until you get it right. Now, one thing I will say, when you are pulling your floss through your felt, it's really important that you don't pull too tight. I found that in a few places I accidentally pulled my my embroidery floss a little bit too tight, and it created some bunching, and that just made it harder to attach the backing and sew it together. You really want that piece to be flat, so again, don't pull your embroidery floss too tight. These are the acorns, and I think they're so cute. I did two of them, two triangles with the acorn embroidery. Those acorns are on the white felt, so on the brown felt, I thought it would be fun to do a little bundle of leaves. And because I had just done leaves on these acorns and I've done leaves in another embroidery project, I felt really confident in my ability to create leaves. And so I actually didn't even draw them ahead of time, and I was able to make it work. I just started by creating two stems and the veins for the leaves first, and then it was easy to use the satin stitch to fill in and make the leaves look the way I wanted. Now, if you're not confident in doing that, that's totally fine. Like I said, I've made a lot of leaves, and that's why I felt confident. You can do the same method I did, where you just draw leaves directly on to your felt, or you can use the other methods we talked about, printing and using that water-soluble fabric or liner, or you can also draw on with your Cricut machine. So there's different ways to transfer those images onto felt if you don't feel confident doing it yourself. But after I had those veins, I just went in with my orange thread on one of my leaves, and you'll see I'm just using that satin stitch and making some of the stitches longer than other stitches. This just kind of created the ridges and the points in the leaves, and filled it in until I was happy with the way it looked. I did orange for this leaf, and then for the other leaf in the bundle, I did a gold color. And I honestly love the way this color combo turned out. Even with the darker background, I feel like they really pop because they're almost like a metallic shimmery color, which kind of makes them look like they're glistening in the sun, which is really fun. Also, I did use the same color scheme with this embroidery floss as I did when I embroidered the white triangles, and I'm glad I did that because I just feel like it made everything really cohesive. I think having a color palette really helps tie everything together and make your design look intentional. Also, because I picked a really simple color palette with just the dark brown, the gold, and the orange, it made my design really simple and my decision-making process really easy. So this is definitely something I would recommend, especially if you're new to embroidery and you're not quite sure where to get started. Just pick a few colors and repeat those colors, find ways to tie them in together, and it kind of creates a sense of cohesion and an intentional design. Okay, once I was done with the embroidery, it was time to create the backing for my felt pieces. Now, for the backing for the felt pieces that I had embroidered, I decided to use this white fabric. It kind of has a brown floral on the other side. I just thought it was fun to add some variety. You won't really see this very much, so it didn't matter unless I hang it somewhere where you can see both sides of the banner. But I like this fabric, so I went ahead and used it. I cut out 2 triangles, or actually 4 triangles, to back all of my felt pieces because I have 2 white felt pieces and 2 brown felt pieces. Then I just proceeded to sew that on the exact same way I did earlier. I'm going to show you this process in real time rather than sped up like I did earlier, just so you can kind of see how I maneuver around the corners. I also think sometimes we expect things to go faster because we see them sped up on the internet, but in reality, slow and intentional crafting and creating can be really rewarding, and it's okay if it takes you a while. So you can see I lifted up my petal and pivoted the fabric once I got to the corner. I didn't sew all the way to the corner. I left a little gap just to kind of create that border. So I have about 1/4 of an inch border all the way around. So I left about 1/4 of an inch at the point, and that's where I pivoted and turned. And I just did that by lifting up the petal and turning the fabric. So here you'll see me do that again. So if you watch, I just lift up the little latch, turn my fabric, and then put the petal back down and keep sewing. So pretty simple, and I'm just doing that all around the edges. I just did a simple straight stitch, nothing fancy, and if you just go nice and slow and just keep your edges lined up, then it should go pretty smoothly. One more thing, if you're new to sewing, when you start and finish a stitch, you should always back stitch. This will just help it not come undone, and I do that by pushing down this button and running the petal for just a minute. Then I can cut the string off, and I'll just go ahead and use my pinking shears once again. Those are those jagged scissors you saw me using earlier to trim all of the edges. And this just kind of gives it a fun and finished look rather than making it look like it's incomplete by having those raw edges. And so I just do that all the way around my triangle, and I'm barely cutting off. It's just enough to give that jagged edge because I don't want to cut the seam. I don't want to cut where I stitched. So I'm just being really careful to only get the very edge of my triangle. And that is how the finished embroidered triangle turned out. I took out my pins, and I think it looks super cute and just so nice and finished. I love having both sides done, both the felt embroidered side and then the fabric backing, because it just makes the whole thing look really nice and finished. I also did that with my white felt, and again I had 2 white embroidered pieces and 2 brown embroidered pieces, and all of them got this same white backing. And I just used my pinking shears once again, and then it was time to assemble the banner. Now there are a lot of ways you could go about this. One thing you could do is actually sew ribbons in between your 2 layers so that you have ribbon ties to tie onto string. You could also get a ribbon, fold it over the top of your bunting banner and sew so that you're sewing it right onto the bunting banner. But I wanted to keep it as simple as possible for the sake of this tutorial. So I actually just sewed a piece of embroidery thread through the 2 layers at each top corner. And then I can just tie that embroidery floss directly onto my twine. And I just used twine. Again, you can use ribbon. You can coordinate your ribbon to match the different fabrics that you've chosen. I actually really like the look of ribbon, and I might one day go back and change that, but I just wanted to keep this process pretty simple as I was showing you guys. But there's lots of options here. You can customize in whatever way you want. I do think that the twine and the string kind of gives it that really like earthy and rustic kind of look, which is perfect for fall. So I did like the twine. I thought it was really cute, and I thought it was really fitting in our entryway on this table. I think it turned out so cute. I'm really proud of this embroidery, and I hope I created an heirloom piece that will last for a long time. I think it's so adorable. There's so many different places I could put it too. If you want to know how I did the leaf garland as well, I actually cut these leaves out on my Cricut and then just hot glued them to this rope. So that's also another fun garland idea. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. I have another fun project for you next week. My name is Jenneca, and I make home-centered content designed to inspire your creativity and resourcefulness and teach you new skills. So we do a lot of crafting, decorating, DIYs, and organization here on this page, and I have another fun project for you next week. I post every Friday. If that's something you're interested in, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, and be sure to stick around. I love this community, and I hope you'll be a part of it. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.